This podcast is for information purposes only and is not and should not be construed as professional advice or an offer or commitment by any Rabobank group member to enter into a transaction. The views expressed by the presenter and or guest are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of Rabobank. Please see the podcast description for our full disclaimer. Welcome to Rabo Talks Growing Our Future, where we talk to experts from both here in New Zealand and across the world to bring New Zealand farmers and growers the information they need to make informed, strategic decisions about the future direction of their business to ensure they continue to thrive in a fast-changing world. In today's agricultural landscape, the question often arises, can profitability and sustainability truly coexist? It's a challenge that many farmers and industry professionals grapple with, balancing economic viability with environmental stewardship in a sector that's constantly evolving. In today's episode, we're joined by Jodie Goudswaard, a highly regarded rural professional and hands-on farmer who brings a unique perspective shaped by both practical experience and academic research. Jodie has just recently completed her Kellogg research project, which is a significant achievement, and she explored the intersection of financial performance and sustainable practice within New Zealand's dairy industry. We dive into the motivations behind her research, the findings that emerged, and the stories that brought her data to life. Jodie shares examples of how values-driven decision-making is influencing farm success and highlights the traits and mindsets common among top-performing farmers. This episode offers thoughtful insights and evidence-based perspectives on how the sector can move forward, not by choosing between profitability and sustainability, but by embracing both. Enjoy this episode. Jodie, thank you so much for joining us today on Growing Our Future podcast.
Thank you.
Before we get stuck into the episode, let's hear a little bit about you. Can you give us a bit of background on who you are and the different roles you juggle both on the farm and in your work as a rural professional?
Cool. Thank you, Katie. I'm a dairy farmer. My husband and I brought our first dairy farm just over 3 years ago. And I also work for Dairy NZ, so I manage Dairy Base, which is a data tool for dairy farmers. We collect physical and financial and environmental information. But probably what keeps me busiest is 3 teenagers who my oldest one has just got his full licence, which is helpful, but still a taxi driver for the 2 younger ones, which is great.
Nice. Your eldest will be able to be the taxi driver soon, surely.
He takes some bribery.
Nice.
Yes.
Doesn't need payment, does he?
The offer of free fuel goes a very long way.
Nice.
Yeah.
Whereabouts are you based, Jodie?
I work in the Newstead, so the Hamilton Dairy NZ office, and our dairy farm is in a little place called Walton, which most people kind of know is between Matamata and Morrinsville.
Amazing. And how long have you been dairy farming for?
So my husband's a city boy, born and grew up in Wellington, and about 18 years ago he decided that he wanted to give dairy farming a go. So, but as with dairy farming, we sort of he started as a farm assistant and worked his way up, but we've sort of been Bay of Plenty, Waikato, for the whole 18 years, moved around quite a lot. So although before we brought our farm, we were also in Walton for 5 years. So it's a really great community. So it was cool to be able to buy a farm there.
Oh, amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, Jodie, I know you've just wrapped up your Kellogg research project, which is a massive achievement. So firstly, a big well done on that. It's no small feat, as we both know. I'm really keen to delve into some of the key insights you uncovered in your research project. So let's start at the beginning there. What was the focus of your research and what inspired you to choose the topic that you did?
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's massive, right? Lots of weekends and lots of evenings, but feels great to be done. So for me, it was around understanding dairy farmers, how they've sort of managed to be both profitable and environmentally responsible. So the title of my report is called Balancing Profit and the Environment. When we purchased our first farm, we wanted to be profitable, but also environmentally sustainable. It was really important, sort of fit with our values. But we had kind of a bit of feedback that sort of said you had to choose or you had to, you couldn't do both. So I wanted to set out really and find farmers who were doing both. And I was able to use the dairy-based data. And I looked at over an average of 4 years. So I looked at farmers and I looked in each region. So they needed to be sort of in the top 30% for operating profit per hectare, but also in the bottom 30% for enteric methane and nitrogen surplus. And then I got in touch with sort of top farmers in each region and interviewed them. So for me, it was more around understanding like their values and decisions that they made that made them successful or sort of drove their behaviours to be that way. So that was sort of my inspiration.
Okay, and so let's start with what were some of the most surprising findings that came out of your research?
So probably two main ones. The first one was that actually enteric methane and also sort of applied nitrogen fertiliser, there was very little correlation between that and operating profit. So farmers out there, a lot of them were applying quite low levels of nitrogen but still being highly profitable. So it sort of challenged that idea that environmental care came at a financial cost. And then the other one was actually a lot of farmers talked a lot about their values. Things like honesty and simplicity were kind of central to their success. So it wasn't sort of technical decisions. It was more of a mindset. They didn't sort of talk about measuring kilos of milk solids, but more about sort of knowing that they're doing the right thing, but both economically and ethically. So they were definitely profitably focused. They understood that they needed to make a profit, but it wasn't sort of the driving factor. It wasn't sort of central. It was that bigger picture for them.
Okay. And when you say, actually, firstly, can you just clarify what you mean by enteric methane, just for any listeners that might not understand that? Let's just get that clarification first.
This is mostly because the data that we have only measures enteric methane, which is pretty much feed going in. So the amount of feed that they eat influences the amount of enteric methane. So when you think of total methane, there's things like fuel use, there's the different feeds getting onto the farm. Obviously, things like PKE have a higher total methane emissions because you've got to think about getting it onto the farm. So that isn't encompassed in enteric methane. It's literally sort of food going in to the cow and then the enteric methane coming out of the cow.
Okay, cool. And so when you say you looked at the balance between profitability and environmental sustainability, what other, how did you define environmental sustainability? Like, what was in the kind of realms of that? Yeah,
so it is quite hard. So I did use nitrogen surplus, and it's not a perfect sort of proxy for nitrogen sort of going into our waterways, but it's because there's a whole range of factors, riparian planting and soil type and those kind of things. So, but I didn't have enough of that data, so I just looked at nitrogen surplus. So that's the amount of nitrogen going in the terms literally of nitrogen fertilizer, and then nitrogen going out in product, which is sort of milk and meat. So that leftover is sort of nitrogen surplus, and I looked at it per hectare. And then the same with the enteric methane, I looked at it per hectare. So that was sort of that total methane. And then the operating profit that I looked at, again, I did it per hectare. So, and I did specifically choose farms in each region, understanding that, a farm in Canterbury under irrigation is going to be quite different to a farm in Northland. So, and the figures were quite different. So I looked at identifying a top farm in each region and talking to those farmers.
And how different were they? I'm just interested in were the results the same in terms of the farmers were profitable and still low impact on the environment across each region, or were there any variances?
So within each region, it was still quite simple easy to find some top farmers who were in the top 30% profitable within each region. But when, for example, I compared the top Canterbury farmer with, for example, the top Northland farmer, their operating profit was higher in Canterbury, but usually their emissions were higher as well.
Okay.
So within the region, pretty simple to find them as, bottom 30% of their region. But if I had to have compared for the whole country, it would have looked quite different. I imagine that it would have been, more around a few regions rather than the whole country.
Yeah, okay. So did anything really challenge your initial assumptions going into the project?
I did think it would be a little bit more complex, or a little bit more sort of high-tech solutions, but it was pretty much the opposite. So a lot of the they were growing more pasture, but they were using fewer inputs. And they just talked a lot about focusing on the basics. So it did reinforce that kind of idea that good farming is often about doing simple things right. And the other big thing, I suppose it didn't really challenge my belief, but how strong the thought came around about talking to people, not doing it alone, having trusted advisors. So not necessarily a farm advisor, some were, but it was having a trusted neighbour, a mentor, a bank manager, but really trusted advisors, discussion groups. One farmer told me how he researched the hell out of it, so any decision he had to make, and that was, talking to people. So that kind of community and having, sort of support around them was really, really strong with all of the farmers that I talked to.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, I mean, naturally, I'm sort of like that personally. I like surround myself with other people that know stuff, but just to help build your own confidence. But it's interesting that was a common theme between all of those farmers. Like they had a really good support system around them to bounce ideas around and stuff.
Yeah.
You just mentioned one farmer that sort of talked about researching a lot, but were there any sort of standout stories or quotes that really like resonated with you or stuck with you, or anything that came out that you think would be interesting to share?
There's probably two. One of them was quite a simple one, and that was one of my farmers who he said, if you're not sustainable in a business sense, it doesn't matter what else you're doing, you won't be here tomorrow. So that was, was kind of summing up that kind of pragmatic mindset that I saw across all the farmers, like understanding that they needed to be profitable, but it was about, being sustainable in the whole sense of it. But the other one, which kind of I quite liked, I probably think about it a little bit ourselves, but it was like, I really try and create a farm where the kids have an adventure playground to be on. So that was, it was really cool about, thinking about people really and that kind of legacy that he was building on his farm. And it's more than about just a business for him. So that was kind of the one that resonated the most with me, is about kind of creating that adventure playground. He talked a lot about having, the trees and biodiversity, and they've had a river going through the farm and that kind of thing, where the kids could swim in the river and those kind of things. So that was pretty cool.
So what would you, since doing your research, like what would you say to someone that challenged you or challenged the kind of topic of balancing, the possibility of balancing profitability and sustainability? Like what would be your key, what would be an elevator pitch, I guess? Like if someone was, you were at what are those things called? Like a discussion group, or you were at an on-farm day or something, and there was people who were there were kind of not cynical. I don't like to use the word cynical, but maybe not confident about having that balance. Like what would you say to them?
Probably that there are farmers out there doing it. Like, the proof is in the pudding. I've found farmers in every region that were doing it, that were profitable and environmentally friendly. I suppose, I would sort of maybe just challenge them to be curious and maybe connect with those farmers, keep an open mind, that kind of thing. It wasn't actually hard to find those farmers, which was quite, like I did have my choice of farmers that I could talk to in every region, which was great. So there is farmers out there doing it. And I would just sort of say, kind of be curious, which actually was kind of a strong theme that came through with a lot of those farmers. They were all quite curious. To kind of connect with them and find out more about what they're doing that makes them that way.
And so on the back of that, like what practices did you find were most effective in achieving both those economic and environmental goals, like based on what they were doing?
Yeah, so growing pasture was number one.
Okay.
So the highest correlation with profit was that pasture growing thing. So, and then the other one, some of this is not rocket science, right? The other one was keeping operating expenses low. So they talked about sort of limiting nitrogen use, but protecting soil structure. And then sort of what I kind of said before about researching the hell out of it, a lot of them were basing their decisions were based on data. They talked about sort of credible evidence, like having the science, not a sales pitch, but more science to back up their decisions. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing they did often talk about, like sustainability for them was not about ticking a box.
Yeah.
Which for some it has become, but it was how they ran their business. So it was about that bigger picture.
I think that's so important to distinguish that, because particularly with, changing governments and with that, the pressure obviously at the moment is off a little bit in this space, but not from a global stage. But when you take away the regulations and stuff, it's actually still important to have it embedded in your business decisions rather than just when someone tells you it's important or not, because that's when you sort of get into, that's where the stress comes into it.
Yeah.
Sort of,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
How do you think some of your findings could influence the wider dairy industry in New Zealand?
Hopefully it's a hopeful message.
Yeah.
So I think there is a little bit of a narrative that profitability and sustainability may be at odds. Mm-hmm. But like my research did show that it can be aligned, that there are farmers doing both out there. I think, what came through really clearly is farmers do learn from farmers. So sort of community engagement, collaboration, education is really important. And we know that some farmers may need some clearer policy signals, but mostly it's about sort of supporting each other, maybe practical tools, and that sort of curiosity and willingness to adapt, I think, are pretty important. But it sort of starts with that sort of knowledge sharing and giving voice to those farmers.
Do you think that we've got enough channels for that knowledge sharing and stuff? I mean, that was probably one of the reasons why we started this podcast, was to share stories like this to farmers that maybe don't have the time to go to discussion days, or that was one of the reasons why we did this. But do you think there are enough kind of channels in order for farmers to share and chat, and other than down at the pub, which is also a good way to do it?
Yeah. All farmers, they have different ways of finding out their information, don't they, and learning and that kind of thing. So we do need to tap into as many of those channels as we can. So the ones listening to the podcast, but then if people are heading down to a discussion group, I think there is enough. Some will pick up the paper. Everyone has got sort of different ways of learning, but it's kind of trying to get across all of those.
Yeah.
And sort of share that message, I think, would be the most difficult.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this values piece that you've discussed. So it sounded like being sort of values-based played a big role in their success. How did the farmers describe that connection between their personal values and their business decisions?
Yeah, so they didn't separate the two. It was pretty much the key. It was things like, they were woven into how they ran their business. So I put another quote here is we want to leave the land in better shape for our kids and run a business that we can be proud of. So for them it was entwining their values into their business philosophies and what sort of decisions they made on farm. And I think pretty much nearly everyone mentioned leaving the land in a better sort of position than when they found it, kind of thing. So and that sort of that pragmatic mindset that they knew that, they want to have a profitable business, but going along with a lot of that long-term thinking, it wasn't kind of short-term wins, it was that sort of long-term thinking that just aligned with their values. That meant that, everything from sort of stocking rate to staff, a lot of, not just sort of community and farm advisors, but also that staff, because that's a massive part of their business about, making them feel part of the family and that kind of thing. So, definitely they weren't separate. It was, values sort of led those business decisions on farm.
And were there any kind of common, not traits, it's the wrong word, were there any common themes in terms of these businesses? Did they have boards, or did they have kind of formal structures to help business decisions, or were they were they mum and dad farmers making decisions at the kitchen table? Was there any common commonalities around that?
I'm pretty sure they all were like family-owned farms.
Mm-hmm.
A few of them owned more than one, but they weren't kind of big operators. They weren't run by boards. Yeah, they were smaller. I suppose they talked about sort of that succession planning, but not in that legal sense, but as a way of kind of leaving it for their kids. So it was quite that kind of family focused business partners. Most of them I spoke to couples, not always. Some it was, the main sort of farmer, and that was a mixture of female and male.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were sort of all sort of family owned. That sort of strong sense of community and learning from others, that kind of thing sort of came through. I suppose if we're looking at those common kind of traits or mindsets, it was definitely that strong kind of community and family feel amongst them.
Okay. And so now what? Post Kellogg, you've got this research and these insights. How do you plan on sharing them? Kind of what's the next step?
This podcast, Katie? Yeah, I know. Thanks. I am sharing it with my colleagues in a couple of weeks, which is pretty cool. So as you know, maybe not your listeners, but as part of your research project, you also need to do a presentation, which is a little bit scary.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you do a 15-minute presentation. So I'm going to be sharing that presentation with colleagues internally. And yeah, hopefully kind of get that message out there a bit, that they're not at odds with each other, that you can do both, and share that message. I have thought about maybe contacting a couple of the farmers themselves and seeing if they would be happy to sort of share their name and journey. So in my report they are all anonymous, but I would be quite keen for them to kind of, a lot of them were quite surprised sort of thing when I rang them, to sort of, like you are, in that top for profitability, but you're environmentally sort of friendly, environmentally sustainable. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, I'd quite like to see if there may be some that might be keen to share their journeys a little bit as well, kind of have that personal connection. So
yeah, that'd be great. I was just thinking that because that's, like often farmers like talking to other farmers, as we've discussed, and that's that would be really great if they could, if they were open to sharing that. Just someone could pick up the phone and have a yarn to them, or even organise some field days or something on their farms.
Yeah.
Jodie, if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing in the sector to help farmers thrive sustainably, what would it be?
One thing. I think we should be celebrating that. I've kind of call it values-led success. That's, for me, it's not scale, it's not output, but it's more that kind of stewardship thing.
Yeah.
That would be probably my one big flag, is to kind of celebrate
highlight
those
that.
ones.
Yeah, particularly given, the research that you've done showed that those values were the drivers behind being both profitable and sustainable.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, what would you hope that industry leaders or policymakers would take away from your research? Like, would you like it to influence anything in particular? If so, what would that be?
So I did highlight a few things in my presentation. So firstly, it was around that sharing the science, and farmers did talk about sort of having that trust in where the science is coming from, and they want to see evidence. So strengthening that kind of farmer-scientist partnership, I think, is quite important.
Yeah.
The second one is kind of what I've talked about, is that peer support that peer learning. So as you mentioned as well, is that farmers do learn from farmers, but maybe it's some storytelling, discussion groups, that kind of thing. So that's probably a challenge for me. I'm going to try and talk to these farmers that I interviewed and see if they'd be happy to kind of share their stories. Avoiding blanket solutions. I do feel that farmers don't need more kind of rules.
Yeah.
But they need some, good examples and maybe some trust to get on and do it themselves. And then promote tools like DairyBase. Get my little plug in there.
Yeah, nice.
So, then farmers can kind of benchmark themselves and see how they're going. So it's not a compliance tool, but it's something that they can use. So, That's
that's
probably
actually a
the big
good
ones.
point that we probably actually haven't talked about. Was data a theme that came through at all in the research? Like obviously values and stuff have been massive, but was the use of data?
So, information data. So whether a lot of them, obviously they all use dairy base because that's how I used to identify those farmers. So they all use it in their business, some more than others, which is fine. Finding data from credible sources, kind of trying to get rid of the sort of the spin and maybe the sales talk with some of them, which a few of them did say sometimes it's a little bit hard to kind of find out where the credible sort of data and information is. But yeah, definitely data was really important to all of them around making decisions.
So just for those listeners that might not know what dairy base is, do you want to just give like a really quick rapid fire overview of that?
Yeah, so it's free for dairy farmers, and so we use it internally at Dairy NZ sort of for advocacy and policy, that kind of thing, to help sort of, provide information to government and things like that about how a decision may affect farmers. But farmers can use it themselves. So there's some different levels of information that you can provide. So the basic one is we can give them a financial sort of report, and then they can benchmark. So for example, when we were share milking, I could go and see, I want to see what the top 50% of share milkers in the Waikato are spending their money on. So, down to sort of animal health and farm working expenses, all of those kind of things. So you can benchmark against different groups. You might want to look at once a day farming. So I want to see what, how those are doing compared to what I do. And then you can get into more physical data. So things like fertilizer, reproduction, pasture and crop, those kind of things as well. So, and then we do have a subset that we do environmental data with as well. So, and that's mostly around sort of water science and that kind of thing. So,
okay. And what's your what's the right word? What's like how many people are part of Dairy Base?
So we would do financials for 2,000 farms a year.
Nice.
And it's open to any sort of business owner. So contract milkers, share milkers and farm owners or equity partners we do as well. Great. So we would average 2,000 farms every year do a basic financial. So it is statistically representative, which is great. So, you can kind of get some really good data if you want to look at sort of how your farm may compare against other farms. So
yeah. Awesome. Okay, Jodie, let's just look back on Kellogg just to sort of round out the session today. What would be your kind of key takeaway? What did you love most about the Kellogg program, and what challenged you most?
It was a really, I know that you did it a couple of years ago, Katie. It's a really cool group. You sort of all come in at the start and everyone's a little bit anxious, sort of meeting everyone for the first time. But so it's over 6 months, right? And you really get to know, we're really supportive, like we're still keeping in touch with each other. And you learn, it's that kind of gold is in the room sort of thing. You learn a lot off the other people, off anecdotes or, journeys that they've been on. So that was amazing. To do the project, like it's not something, 15,000 word, it's not something I'm going to kind of do in my spare time. So the push and the journey to go on to write the report was pretty amazing. And what was the other question, Katie?
Anything that challenged you?
The report.
Yeah. Not the high ropes. Did you do the high ropes?
Oh, I loved the high ropes.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah. Oh, my knees were shaking. It definitely challenged me. But no, I found the report probably the biggest challenge. But also for me, I'm not very good at reflecting. Like I kind of, do stage one and move on to the next thing. So that being able to sort of reflect on what I learned in that stage one and what I'm going to take into my own sort of work life and journey, and then what I learned in the next section. So that was really valuable to my learning, is to make that time to reflect on what I'd learned through the whole thing. So
yeah. So is that actually, that was probably going to be my next question, is like what are you going to what you learned throughout that 6 months from a probably more personal perspective? What's something that you're going to take into your day-to-day life? Because it can be easy to sometimes do these courses and then just sort of slot back into day-to-day. But what are you going to kind of commit to take into your next stage?
I have taken heaps of like little learnings. Like, I think my poor team are probably a little bit over me, but every time we sit about once a month, I'll be like, oh, I've got this new tool that I think we should try, and we're going to try this. So there's things like the mental health continuum. It's kind of like, hey, how are you feeling today? Are you in the green? Are you in the red? And things like, oh yeah, heaps. Honestly, I've got all these little post-it notes around my desk. Like, leaders don't have to have all the answers, but they need to make the decision. So lots of things like that. I think for me, it was really understanding, like everyone's kind of got a little bit of a leadership style, but you have to be a different type of leader in a whole lot of different situations. So that was quite a big learning and just sort of understanding for me, because I kind of had this thought that you have this one style and that's how you lead. But actually, you shouldn't be leading like that. Like, that's probably your go-to personality, but understand that in different situations you need to be able to lead in different ways and that kind of thing. So yeah, still kind of just trying to be a cool leader, lead my team. Hopefully there'll be, other teams in the future, but I'm sort of really enjoying sort of cementing all that learning and trying different tools and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Amazing. Jodie, thank you so much for your time. Just before we wrap up, we're trying a new thing to sort of just draw some more personality from our guests. So you're going to be the first one I try this with, but what is your favourite work lunch?
My favourite work lunch? It's probably when, actually, I can answer this one. It's sourdough bread with avocado and dukkha and a little bit of Worcester sauce.
Oh, yum.
Yeah,
nice.
So not at the moment, because the avocados taste like soap, right? That's what it took me a while to think. But, when the avocados are at their freshest, and a little bit of dukkha and Worcester sauce on the top.
Nice, I love that.
That's my fave.
Work lunch is always, for me, they're like hard work, so always nice to know.
I was going to say when someone else prepares it, right, that's always quite nice. Like, I don't know, you turn up and they're like, oh, we've got someone's having something and we've got a lunch prepared today. That's always quite nice. But
when that's not on offer, sourdough and some avocado.
Sourdough and avocado with dukkha, yeah.
Yum.
Yeah.
Jodie, thank you so much for your time today. It's been, a pleasure to sort of draw some insights out of your research and
thank you.
Yeah, just hear the kind of main drivers around how people are balancing, dairy farmers are balancing that profitability and sustainability.
Yeah.
And the importance of like values. It's awesome to hear that.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
That's all right.
Thank you for listening to Rabo Talks Growing Our Future podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how Rabobank can support you to succeed into the future, please go to rabobank.co.nz.